What is going on, OWS fam, YouTube fam, Props fam? Welcome to the Week 3 edition of Props Talk. I am your host, JM to Win, here with my guest, Jay Reezy. Reezy, how we doing, man?
Yeah, man, doing good. Week two, we're going into week three now. I love week four, week five, week six. I think those are my three favorite weeks of the season. You know, you have enough data from this season to kind of make some informed decisions on, but maybe the rest of the field or the rest of the people out there in the prop streets haven't really caught up to those things yet.
Yeah. I like that shout. I've always felt that way about DFS as well. That's kind of a sweet spot because you get enough information that you can kind of adjust to things early, but not so much information that the books have adjusted or that other DFS players have adjusted. Although I do think that there are some spots where maybe we've seen some overreactions from the books or some underreactions from the books. And so definitely finding an edge there. Yeah, you want to talk about week two? We had another successful week over in the prop streets, right? With the $9 props pass that we had last week.
Yes, sir. $9. I think we profited $18. So there you are. A nice little double up there on your first week. But it was a mixed bag in week two. You know, we went 7-6 for a profit of zero point 0.2 units, $20 if you're betting 100. So basically a break-even week overall. But we are happy with two positive weeks to start the season. We sit at 12-8 on the season for a profit of about 3 units and 13% ROI. And we're super happy with that ROI. If we can keep that up for all 18 weeks of these regular seasons and into the playoffs, we will be stoked. One thing so far, that we have noticed is that the QB props are being released a lot earlier than the rest of the skill position guys, the running backs, the wide receivers, the tight ends. So it is allowing us to kind of work down from our QB projections early in the week and still be ready for the skill position drops. One thing that we are leaning a little bit more into for those skilled positions this year versus years in the past is like man zone splits. Both from a QB perspective and for wide receivers, how they perform, versus different coverages. You get to see some pretty dramatic splits. I actually had a conversation with a couple of our subscribers in the props channel today about, Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. We see CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens perform way better versus man. The Cowboys are playing the Bears this week, who have ran a lot of zone, about 70% so far in 2025. But now they're without Jalen Johnson. And we're just trying to figure out, like, will that injury kind of force them to play more man to kind of hide the talent gap? Or if Dennis Allen will he try to play a bit more man and bring a little bit more pressure? So you can kind of look at it from two perspectives. The Bears are down a meaningful quarterback, so, Dak could cook, or the injury could kind of lead Dallas to see more zone coverage as a result. And it might be a little bit harder for those big plays to occur. You have any thoughts on that, JM? Let me just get us set up here with DraftKings.
Yeah, so I actually have a few thoughts. First, I want to talk about the week. It was one of those weeks where I checked in on, I think it was Sunday afternoon, and we were like 7-4, maybe even 7-3 at that point. And then it's just the nature of where the bets fall on the slate, right? We could just as easily have started out like 3-5, 3-6, and then you get this sweet run out at the end. And you're like, it feels awesome. But yeah, I checked in and it was like, man, we're crushing this week.
Yeah.
And then I checked back in on the late Monday night, Tuesday morning, and it was like, I was like, oh, okay. It was just like, it was positive week, but nothing huge there. And that's kind of the swings of props. But like you said, anytime you can come out ahead, that's good. And over time, positioning us where we want to be. Yeah, you know what? Another thing too that we've noticed is, and this isn't new, this is going back the last couple of years, but books are putting out, we're seeing them putting out like the harder to beat props early. And as you've mentioned, as Xandamer has mentioned, a lot of times kind of collecting some information there from bettors, because optimally they want just 50% of the money on either side. But they also, there's this voting in aggregate that takes place with betting where that 50% on either side, generally speaking, is also just going to be a good line. And so if you can get over and under on passing yards out first before you get out, over and under on attempts, over and under on receiving yards for a player before you get out, over and under on receptions, then you can kind of set those receptions lines or those attempts lines a little bit better, because those lines will start to move sort of, favorably or unfavorably based on where they place them and what the public's seeing. And there's so many sharp places out there for people to do research and understand these things that yeah, can make a difference for them to get those books out. So, we kind of look for the ways that we can still carve edges, the places where we can find those little places where the books are slow to react instead of where they're being faster to react. And we're continuing to see those early in the season. I would go so far as to say we had some bad runouts last week where it was like favorable setups that didn't fall in our favor, but would have over time. As far as the man zone stuff, yeah, I mean, I think that's That's one of the key things that we've been seeing this year, and we can take that into DFS. We've been taking that into DFS, been taking it into props, but to continue to emphasize it because we can see places where maybe projections aren't able to account for those as easily, while also understanding specific skill sets, right? Like CeeDee Lamb is inherently somebody who can do well against zone. Obviously, going to take away some of those big plays. George Pickens is less well equipped to do well against zone because then you've got the defensive backs facing the quarterbacks. You don't have as many of these contested catches where it's just like he's able to be slow to react. There was one pass this last week where he got his hand. So it was an incomplete pass with almost an interception in the end zone, but he slowed down like his running, which just forced the corner to slow down and got that separation of right. He got his body right where he wanted it for the ball, and then put his hands out really late to try to catch it. And just little things like that he's so good at when there's somebody blanketed on him and trying to catch those contested passes or those tight window passes. And so, definitely swings over to CeeDee Lamb in a situation like that. And I think those are some of the things we can look at as we're looking at bets this week as well. So, with that, and kind of cool, right? This, for any of you who are watching us live right now, any of you who are new to the show, the idea here again is not necessarily to provide bets. We will talk about some of the bets we've taken in the props channel, but also just talk through our thought processes, to talk through what we're seeing in the betting space and how books are treating things and where we're potentially able to find some edges. So we're going to go through 3 different spots today that we've taken in. I think we've taken all 3 of these in the props channel. I'm not totally sure about the last one. Josh, you can tell me whether or not we dropped that one in there. And then we're going to talk about a couple alt lines that Reezy and I like. So again, these places where we can get asymmetric payouts, kind of similar to DFS, asymmetric payouts on these higher lines that we can take on players who we think can have a chance to not just hit the over, but to hit the over in a significant type of way. And we can fully capitalize on that. So Josh, I want to throw it over to you for this first spot that we want to talk about. What are you seeing with this one?
Perfect. We are going to take a look at Philadelphia, where the Eagles are hosting the LA Rams. I'm sending you over the screen right now if you want to put that up. The Eagles are 3.5-point favorites, a game total of 44.5. I want to take a look at Matthew Stafford lines. Someone that we had projected as overs across the board. We could have taken anything, but we ended up taking 220.5 passing yards. You can see there now it's up to 229, so already got 9 yards of closing line value. Philly's been known as a pass funnel defense for the last couple of years, and we saw that continue for the first 2 weeks of 2025. In week 1, the Eagles played Dallas in a 24-20 victory where Dak attempted 34 passes. In week 2, KC threw just 29 times, but with an additional 7 Patrick Mahomes scrambles. Despite the attempts, both Dak and Mahomes, they failed to clear 200 yards, which was pretty on point with Philadelphia last year. Their defense was great. And we think that's really having an effect, an impact on Stafford's line this early in the season. As someone that watches, all the games jam, I'm sure you saw the 4 drops from CeeDee Lamb in week 1, left probably, 70, 80, 90 yards on the field there. In week 2, Patrick Mahomes registered a minus 10% completion rate over expectation. So he completed 10% less than we would have expected. So that signals that KC left a lot on the field there as well. JM, do you see the Eagles holding Stafford and the LA Rams in check here, or are the books overreacting to 2 weeks of data?
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you on this one. I love this bet because you mentioned the CeeDee Lamb drops. There was also Tyquan Thornton got wide open beyond the defense and got overthrown by Patrick Mahomes. So, we see these places where the perception and the reality are skewed by the perception is skewed by the results, right? One good example, going back to the Cowboys, right? I was finally getting a chance to watch that Cowboys-Giants game last night in totality. I kind of watched the end as it was happening and went back and watched the whole thing last night. It was 13-10 halfway through the third quarter, right? And so the perception is like, oh, the Giants defense is horrible and the Cowboys were just able to torch them throughout this game. And like, that wasn't actually the case, right? So these things can play out very differently in the box score than they actually did on the field. On top of that, Adoree Jackson has been attackable for the Eagles, right? So we can look at a defense and it's like, oh, this defense was good last year and they have a lot of the same pieces, but where are the pieces different, right? You have Cooper DeJean in the slot, you have Quinyon Mitchell on the outside, but on the other side, that has been an attackable place. And now we have this Rams offense where you have these 2 pieces in Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua. Devontae Adams, who is not at all washed, right? If you've watched these games, he's getting open, looks tremendous. He and Stafford are not completely 100% on the same page yet, but they're getting there more and more each week. And clearly they want to get Devontae Adams going. He had 5 end zone targets this last week in one game, right? For a lot of guys, that might be like week 7, 8, 9. That would be a pretty good stat for them to have that many end zone targets at that point. So they're clearly wanting to emphasize Devontae Adams and get him going. And like you said, this is not a great spot for running the ball. So this all lines up really nicely for the Rams to be throwing the ball and for the Rams to be throwing the ball to the outside, to these wide receivers. And so, and another thing I like about this too is we talked last week about one of the difficult things for people in betting unders, why people don't like betting unders, is because then you're sitting there for the entire game being like, I hope this guy doesn't have this one play, right? Well, taking the over here, we have something where Puka Nacua is capable of catching one short pass and picking up all these yards. And then both these guys also work downfield. And you also have a guy like Tutu Atwell. And you also have Jordan Whittington, who kind of gets overlooked. And Sean McVay uses that to his advantage to sometimes get all the motion going one way and get Jordan Whittington open a different direction. So, just a lot that sets up well in this spot. I think 220.5 was low, and really like seeing that, like we talked about already on the show, that closing line movement where now if you wanted to get it now, it's 229.5, and we were able to get it early. And so even if you lose bets like that, you feel over time you're going to make money on those because you know that you're getting them early where other people are getting them late, right? And that's going to even out in your favor over time. So yeah, really love that we caught that one. Not only caught it, but caught it early, because even the 229.5 wouldn't be a bad line. Like that's that's why it's the line now, right? Because 50% of the time he's still probably going over that. And so the 220.5 I think is a really nice line. And I like what you brought up about, the nature of how Dak finished under, how Mahomes finished under, and how different this could look to the public if it had just gone a little bit differently. And so, one of these edges early in the season, small sample sizes, people can overreact to them. Still a good defense, but 220.5 is really low.
Too low, right? And we can go back to last year where, the Philadelphia Eagles defense was still just as dominant, and Stafford had 2 games against them, one in the playoffs. He went for 243 passing yards and 324 passing yards. That's only 6.8 and 7.4 yards per attempt. Neither game was garbage time or like some big trailing kind of game script. He went 13-7 to the over on this line last year. The unders were mostly low-scoring games against bad teams down the stretch, and at that point, Kupp was just kind of like a shell of his former self, right? We're now adding Devontae Adams instead, so just a huge upgrade there. I love your point on Adoree Jackson. That was one of our big things too, right? Stafford and McVay, they're so smart that they're going to find ways to put Puka and Devontae in just advantageous situations all game long. Having both of those guys now, you'll always be able to, make sure Adoree Jackson needs to be on his game, or he's just going to get torched here. Going back to that man and zone stuff, we do have Stafford handling zone a little bit better than man. We've seen Philly run a lot of zone in 2025, about 75%. Stafford has 8.1 yards per attempt versus zone versus 7.5 yards per attempt versus man. Puka and Adams, obviously both just great route runners, great versus any coverage, but the addition of Adams should boost Stafford's zone numbers even more.
Yeah, 100%. And, you brought up last year, right? And it's like, you can take that last year and then map it over this game where Philly is a little bit less good on defense, at least in the early going, and where the Rams are equipped to be better on offense than they were last year. And so, it should be a fun game too, where you have two teams that, legit potential NFC championship preview here. And one of the things I always like in those games is you've heard quarterbacks talk about it. Patrick Mahomes talked about it when he did the quarterbacks show, documentary, whatever you want to call it, the Netflix sports series a couple years ago. And he was playing Brady one week, and he said when you play a quarterback like this, your game plan is different because you go into the game knowing that you need to be aggressive every time you have the ball. And so we also see that, if you pay attention to these games, when two really good teams play each other, the mindset is different on offense in those games. And so we always like to kind of lean just a little bit more toward the over in those spots because you know that the aggressiveness is going to be there and the mindset's going to be, hey, we got to score points here. We got to be taking shots here. We got to be taking chances. And so, really like this one. Going over to a game where the mindset might not quite be that, and maybe we don't want to swing fully to the overs in this spot. What do we have for this second spot that we're looking at here?
We're going to go over to New England, where the Patriots are hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pretty much the opposite. The Patriots are a slight home underdog, total of 44.5 points. Both teams are 1-1. The one thing that really caught our eye here is just how bad the Steelers have been against the run. They've seen 55 rush attempts for 250 yards just from the running backs over 2 games. This is highlighted by Kenneth Walker, 8.1 yards per carry, and Breece Hall's 5.1 yards per carry. They've been solid versus the secondary backup backs there, but they're still giving up over 4.5 yards per carry to all running backs. Pittsburgh was run funnel in 2024, seeing a -2 a pass rate over expectation against in 2024. Last week, the Patriots became more of like a three-man running back by committee. We hate those. They increased, OWS's fan favorite Antonio Gibson's role. And Drake Maye, he's already ran 14 times. He has 14 rushes on the season, which makes picking which running back was going to take advantage of this defense hard to predict. So instead, we just decided to go with, Drake Maye passing attempts. We took the under 33.5 earlier this week, but the 32.5 at low juice are just fine. This 123 is getting a little bit out of range for us, but is still just fine if you're looking to still get in. Do you think that this is the way to attack these types of situations where there's like a little bit, of unknown in the backfield, but that they will run? Or do you have a read on which RB is kind of more likely to take advantage of this matchup?
I think it's a little bit too early in the season to think we have a read, right? We saw last week Ramondre Stevenson was kind of emphasized here, and he ran really well. I think the people forget that, people think of Ramondre Stevenson like, I don't know, like a Najee Harris, where it's like every touch is kind of wasted. Like maybe he does a decent thing for his football team, but he's not really that useful. Ramondre Stevenson's pretty good, and he looked good last week. And we obviously know that Travion Henderson can catch fire. So I love that thought process of saying we expect the Patriots to have success on the ground here. What does that mean for their play calling? And realistically, we've got 2 games, and we had the Patriots way over this mark in past times. What was it, 46 or 47 in week 1, and then way under, or significantly under in week 2. But I think if we played out this whole season, we would take the under on this. If we took the under on 33.5 every single week, I think we'd probably win that bet 11 times, 12 times, right? This is not an offense that is wanting Drake Maye to go out there and throw the ball 34 plus times in a game. And against the Steelers team that, they put up points against the Jets, but that was kind of the nature of the way that game was developing. This isn't a Steelers team that's, especially Aaron Rodgers. I mean, we've known this for a decade and a half now. He wants to win games. It doesn't really matter to him if his team's scoring 30 plus points. He wants to go out there and, kind of let the clock come all the way down to 1 or 2 seconds on the play clock so he can get as much information as he can. They're going to be a little bit slow paced. They're going to be fine picking up first downs. Rodgers perfectly happy to throw in the short areas of the field. And so there's also that component too, where we could have just fewer total possessions for each team than we might have in a typical game. And so that matters a lot because, again, watching this Cowboys-Giants game last night, it was pretty deep into the second quarter that Dak only had 10 pass attempts. But then what happens? The Cowboys get the ball, there at the end of the half, and they put together a drive, and Dak's throwing the ball a bunch. And then you have these opportunities at the end of the game when it's back and forth, and Dak's throwing a bunch there. All of a sudden, his pass attempts look tremendous, but it was because of the nature of the game flow and how that game was going, as opposed to something systematic that the Cowboys were wanting to do. And so there's always that risk that this, end of half, end of game sets up this way, and Drake Maye ends up with 35, 36 attempts. But more often than not, he's going to be under this number because that's how the Patriots want to run this offense. And then in a game against Pittsburgh, where you're less likely to see those end of half type situations or end of game type situations, where maybe the Pittsburgh defense is playing them well and they're playing the pass well, and the Patriots are like, you know what, let's be conservative here. Yeah, we're going to try to go down and score here with 2 minutes left, but we're also going to mix in some runs. So we're happy settling for a field goal type thing. Put together a drive and then maybe take a shot down the field to score that touchdown. And so, I really like this one and like thinking through the way that this game is likely to play out and how this bet fits into that. So under 33.5, like I said, I think we would just pencil this in as something we could take every week for Drake Maye, and then this spot in particular against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, against Aaron Rodgers, under 33, we're going to be taking that a lot of time. I think you brought up a really good point. The way that we lose these types of bets are when we kind of, we run bad in those final 4 minutes or those final 2 minutes of the first half, where, maybe they've been run heavy and it's 4 minutes, it's 2 minutes left, and you get 4 straight attempts or 5 straight attempts. And, that really just kind of skews everything for us. So, there are ways for us to lose an under 33.5, but if this game just played out normal way, Aaron Rodgers controlling the clock on the other side, we feel really good about this. Both these teams love to play slow. It's expected to become more of a grinded out game. One thing to mention is that the Steelers have given up some big plays, and that could speed up the game. Big plays speed up the game. But for us in this bet in particular, any big play from the Patriots would just have a negative effect on the overall pass volume for Drake Maye anyway. So we feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, I like that from all angles for sure. And then we've got a spot where, speaking of trying to adjust early to things, I saw this one earlier today, and it was, tell me, Josh, did we end up dropping this one in the props channel today?
Yes, we did actually. We once you kind of set us a note on that, we started to look into things, and we love this bet. We're actually really glad to have got on it when we did. It just keeps going up and up and up. But yeah, this is official, and we did get this out to our subscribers.
Okay, so I spotted this one at 44.5 receiving yards. We'll say the player here in a moment. Send it to Josh is just one that I really liked for the props team to look into, and they liked it as well. And I know it's already gone up a little bit. So why don't you tell us the player, and then I'm not even sure where this line's at now, but where the line's at, and honestly, we could see continued movement on this one throughout the week.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of a toe injury may turn down the steam a little bit, but it hasn't yet. We're gonna go to Tennessee, where the 0-2 Titans are hosting the 2-0 Colts. Sorry, they're probably the story of the 2025 season after going with Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson at quarterback. While Jones has made a huge impact, Tyler Warren has been fantastic over his first 2 games of his career, with 11 receptions and 155 yards for an average of 14 yards per catch. Warren's receiving line opened up at 43 this week. JM, you found it at 44. We grabbed it at 47.5, and it's only climbed up here to 49.5 now. So, from 43 to 49 already in a day. Public's definitely on our side for sure. Warren started his career with games of 76 and 79 yards on 8 targets a game. He's ran a route on 78% of Daniel Jones dropbacks. That's a high, and he has the highest target per route run of any of the main skilled positions on the team. Talking about books here and how quickly or slowly they do adjust, we think that they've been slow to adjust here. Tyler Warren in week 1, his prop line was 37.5 yards, got bumped to 44.5 yards in week 2, and then opened here in week 3 at 43.5, so 1 yard lower than it did last year, despite 76 and 79 yards per game. So the books obviously see some regression, and they probably see it in his yards per catch, and that's fair. But even if you use the league average for expected yards per target for tight ends, and that's 7, that's enough for him to clear it with his eight targets. So, Jam, do you see Warren continuing to be a focal point of this offense, or is this game built more for the running backs and wide receivers to succeed?
Yeah, so there's a few things at play here. One, Tennessee's a good defense all the way around, which we actually like for tight ends, right? Tennessee's a good defense against the run. They're a good defense on the outside. They have some weak spots on the outside, but generally speaking, this is a solid defense that they're one of these teams they're a little bit worse than most of the teams they play in the coaching department. They're a little bit worse than most of the teams they play in the talent department, and that's consistent from play to play. So throughout the course of the game, it piles up. I mean, they were beating the Rams at halftime. Rams team, they were just talking about, hey, this could be a NFC Championship preview. And then, Sean McVay is so good at figuring things out as the game goes along that finally the Rams start figuring things out, and the Titans just aren't able to keep up. But I expect this to be a competitive game. On top of that, we've seen a lot to like from Cam Ward and from Alec Aomanor, and less so from Calvin Ridley, but we know what Calvin Ridley can be. We know that he has some level of talent out there and can get open. And so I think that the Titans have potential here to score points. Obviously, they have potential here to just get confused by whatever Lou Anarumo is throwing at them and not have that type of game. But I think there's potential here for the Titans to keep this game competitive. And then on top of that, the Colts on offense they're such a well-schemed offense. Shane Steichen has such a great feel for how to attack an opponent. And Tyler Warren is very clearly a big part of this. And so this is another one where, again, if we can zoom out and say, hey, if we got this line every single week for the rest of the season, would we be over on it more often than we would be under? And I feel very confident that Tyler Warren is going to be over 44.5 in more than half of his games this season, just in the nature of how he's being used, the nature of how this offense looks. And to me, this is one, I like the places where what I was seeing in the offseason start to play out on the field, right? So it's less about me having to adjust my priors and more about me getting confirmation that what I was seeing is actually translating onto the field, right? I was so surprised last year when some people started talking about, Shane Steichen's fighting for his job. And that was like mid-season. And it was like, you guys get like Shane Steichen would get hired so quickly if he got fired by the Colts. He almost took them to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew, right? He was a dropped pass at the end of that last game of the season away from taking them to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew. And then, saddled with Anthony Richardson, who just can't hit things accurately, can't read defenses. And so then, as the season went deeper and deeper and things got worse and worse in Indy, it actually became a real thing. It was like, Shane Steichen might actually get fired, right? Well, he got a guy that he really likes in Daniel Jones, somebody who's been cast off from other teams, been in bad situations, but it was like, I've been saying it since August, right? Daniel Jones is a great fit for what Shane Steichen likes to do, and we're seeing that right now. So I think that this is still a team that people are kind of wondering, especially after the way the Saints started last year through the first 2 weeks. People are kind of wondering, like, is this a fluke? Is this like Cinderella slipper going to come off of them and everything falls apart? And I'm not expecting that we're going to see that, right? I think it's going to continue to be a good team throughout the season and a good, well-schemed offense that's well run. And I think Tyler Warren's going to be a big part of that. So I imagine Tyler Warren's going to be somewhat popular for us in DFS, for people saying, oh yeah, I think he's underpriced here for his ceiling. And then that translates over to props where we can say, yeah, he's probably, this line is probably coming in a little bit too low for what we would expect for him week in and week out over time. And so anytime that I can put myself in a losing, in my mind, in my imagination, put myself in a losing situation Sunday evening and then still say, yeah, I'm happy with that, right? Like if I can look at this and say, what happens if Tyler Warren ends up with 37 yards? How do I feel about this bet, right? And I would still say, yeah, like if we could play this matchup out 17 times, he would be over this, more than 9 times, 9 or more times, I should say, but probably more like 10 times, 11 times, even 12 times in this spot. So yeah, really like this one. Glad we got on this one early. And I like you said, the toe issue, but it wouldn't surprise me if this closes at like 51.5 or 52.5, something like that by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, I think it's going to keep going up. You mentioned all the time with DFS about getting players that are 5K today, but might be 6.2 K in 3 or 4 weeks, right? And I think that we're getting here. As you said, you're very confident that if we got to keep this 44.5-yard line for Tyler Warren all season, he would go over it 8, 9, 10. I would say a little bit more than that. I think we're going to see this up into the 50s pretty frequently, pretty quickly, especially if he comes out here in week 3 with the toe injury and produces. Anybody still, maybe thinking 49.5 is too much? I got a couple stats here for you that, I think 49.5 is still good. Anything below 50, I would be good with. Warren has a yards per target of 9.7 yards. We think that's for real, even though the average is just 7 for tight ends. Like this guy's a monster. Warren leads the team in target share, yards per route run, and yards after contact. But most importantly, he leads the team in both first read percentage and play design rate. Meaning the Colts are calling plays designed to get Warren the ball early in any progression, but they're also designing plays that only go to him, essentially screens for a tight end. He's lined up all over the field. He has seen 50% of his snaps as an inline tight end, but he's also seeing significant snaps out in the slot and outside. As good as Warren has been, his expected fantasy points have actually been higher than his actual fantasy points. So there's a little bit of a signal there that there actually might be more on the bone than what he's produced so far. Versus what the book's thinking, or maybe there's less. As we mentioned, he did sit out Wednesday with that toe injury, but he did suit up on Thursday, getting in a limited practice. I'm pretty sure he's healthy, just a little rest day. Tennessee, back to the man zone splits. Tennessee runs, 70% zone. And in this small sample size that we have of Tyler Warren's career here, he has a 4.29 yards per zone target. He's doing most of his damage versus zone. The wide receivers and the running backs are doing a little bit more damage versus man. So, with that 70% zone rate, we see this as just another spot that Warren's going to get his for sure.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I like about Shane Steichen is he's good at adding these easy buttons for his quarterbacks. And, even Anthony Richardson, when he was disappointing so much, it was like a lot of them was just wide open underneath guys that he was missing by 5 or 6 yards, but like they were wide open on underneath targets. And so kind of these short intermediate targets, Shane Steichen's going to find a way to get these guys open and be able to mash these easy buttons, right? So I think our big risk here is that Jonathan Taylor really gets going and they just continue to feed him in this game. And so, there's always, it depends, you can only get down so much on a prop bet, but if you're kind of a lower stakes DFS player, you could always hedge against this with, hey, some Jonathan Taylor exposure in DFS. But I think more often than not, we're feeling good about this bet and the way that it ends up playing out in this spot. Like I said, I think we've got a good shot at getting a competitive game here because the Titans are a solid team. They're not good enough to win a lot of these games. They're going to be good enough to be competitive in a lot of these games, which we like on these spots. All right, last thing we're going to hit is some alt lines, which might be my favorite part of the show just because it's fun to talk about the upside cases and these places where we can ladder our bets and say, hey, yeah, the over is 50 yards, but also we can hit the 60 yards, the 70 yards, the 80 yards, the 90 yards because of what a player is capable of. So oftentimes that's players who might hit that over really a little bit less than 50% of the time, the over that's being set, but where when they go over, they can go way over. So that's a guy who's explosive or a guy who gets some downfield targets. So we each have one of these we brought to the table. I had 3 that were hard for me to choose amongst. And I also really like the one that you have this week, but Josh, I'm gonna throw it over to you and let you go first on the one that you have here.
Yeah, we were both on this. I kind of stole this one. This was my favorite one of the week, so it's always a good sign when we come to the table with the same things. But we're gonna head to New Orleans here. At the beginning of the show, I talked about how we are looking more into man zone splits for receivers, and I'm gonna use that to campaign for Rasheed Shaheed here. I'm looking at 70 plus receiving yards at 268 and 80 plus receiving yards at 411 here. Gone up one, was 410. We're just putting 0.1 units as we do on these. While we have a small sample size in 2025, Shaheed only has 0.67 yards per route run against zone in 2025. He has very strong zone man splits in his career, so we could see some positive regression here in week 3. Stick with me here, but in 2024, Shaheed averaged 2.52 yards per route run versus zone versus 1.22 yards per route run versus man. So 2.52 to 1.22 in 2024. In 2023, that was 1.88 yards per route run against zone versus 1.52 yards versus man coverage. So not as big as a split in 2023. But if you go back to 2022, it was 3.16 yards per route run versus zone versus 1.93 versus man. So, 2 of these 3 years, we have huge zone splits. He's one of the biggest that we have. Seattle played just 19% man coverage in 2025. The Saints are 7-point road dogs. This looks like the perfect game script for Shaheed to make a big play for me. He went over 70 yards in 4 of 6 games in 2024 and went over 3 of 6 and over 80 in 2024. So obviously a short season, but we did like what we saw last year in 2023. And we think the offense is only better and kind of more creative this year to really take advantage of those splits.
Yeah, and the thing about Shaheed, right, he can do this in one reception, but also he's the kind of guy who, because of his speed, you would expect him to do better against man, but he's not a route running maven. So to be able to just have those opportunities to get the ball in his hands, and then he can do something with the ball after the catch, makes sense why he has these like stark zone versus man type of splits. And then, another thing that I like here, and I've been bringing this up in DFS content so far this season, but this Saints offense, they're not one of these teams that's saying like, oh yeah, we're supposed to be bad this year and we're going to play conservatively. And, that's been the big criticism from me on this Titans offense is Callahan's playing like they want to hide Cam Ward instead of just getting him a chance to develop, right? Whereas the Saints, who nobody thinks that Spencer Rattler is their quarterback of the future, and yet they're treating this like, hey, let's go out there, let's treat him like the starter, let's see what happens here. They're running at the fastest rate in the league. They're often running no huddle. They're often snapping the ball with 20 seconds left on the play clock. They're being aggressive. They're throwing the ball. They're trying to win games in that way. And Rattler's actually looked genuinely good this year. Does he look like a top 12 or 15 quarterback? No, but he looks like a really solid quarterback for this offense. And, concentrated offense, they're throwing the ball. We expect Seattle to do well here. The game's in Seattle, probably be scoring points. And so that sort of compels this Saints team to also be taking shots in the air. And so, yeah, really like this setup for Rasheed Shaheed. Again, does he go over this 50% of the time, just like the over-under? Maybe not. Like he honestly might not in this offense with Spencer Rattler. But when he does, he has those opportunities to go up and up and up, which is why I love the ladder bet on somebody like him. All right, so mine were, I will mention, like my other two that I'm not throwing out here were Justin Jefferson and Nico Collins. I think Justin Jefferson in particular is interesting because Carson Wentz is a big game hunter. Like Carson Wentz is going to take more shots than JJ McCarthy was taking. And like realistically, at this point in their careers, Carson Wentz is probably a better quarterback than JJ McCarthy. A year from now, will that be true? Hopefully not for the Vikings, right? Like JJ McCarthy will hopefully be the better quarterback between the two, but JJ McCarthy has been very slow to develop so far in this offense. Carson Wentz, former would have won the MVP the year that he tore his ACL, had he not torn it that year. And, then obviously weird things happen with his confidence, with his play and all that. He's not the quarterback that he once was, but he still has the potential to step in and do well. So I want to throw that out there. But the guy I'm going to go with is DJ Moore. And here's what I'm seeing here. The Cowboys have Kaiir Elam at one cornerback spot. They have Trayvon Diggs at the other cornerback spot. And Diggs, we think of him as this great player, right? Micah Parsons said this recently that he's had an all-pro cornerback on every single team he's played on. And the implication was that's not because these were the best cornerbacks in every team he played on. The implication was this is because Micah Parsons put so much pressure on the quarterback. The quarterback's having to throw it early. The cornerback is able to clamp down, be aggressive, right? We've seen Trayvon Diggs with these interceptions returned for touchdowns. Well, that's a function of the pass rush getting to the quarterback quickly. So Trayvon Diggs, is probably not as good as he seemed at times, but on top of that, he's hobbled right now. He just doesn't look quite right. So you have Kaiir Elam, who, first round pick, who just really quickly, it was clear that he was not somebody who was going to translate to the NFL. And so you've got that on the outside, and then you got this pass rush that's not really getting pressure. And so that's creating these opportunities for downfield throws against the Cowboys. And so obviously Russell Wilson took advantage of that. He's one of the best in the game at taking advantage of that. So it's not like I expect Caleb Williams to do the same thing here, but we do have an incredibly intelligent coach in Ben Johnson who is going to have an understanding of exactly how to attack this defense. On top of that, which I think is really interesting here, there are really these two different types of defense, right? There are these rules-based defenses, the Seattle 3 or a Matt Eberflus defense with this heavy zone coverage. And then there's like the game plan specific defenses like a Brian Flores, Lou Anarumo, where every week the offense doesn't know what's going to be thrown at them. Well, the thing about these system type defense, same thing with the system offense, it's a Shanahan offense, something like that, is they're very rules based. And so a good coach understands those rules and understands how to manipulate those rules. So in other words, this defensive player understands, hey, these are my keys. If this guy does this, I'm supposed to react this way. But a coach like Ben Johnson then understands that to be able to say, okay, these are this player's rules. So let's have the key that this defensive player is watching do this, and then leverage how that defender will respond in order to get this guy wide open, right? And so Ben Johnson, who has spent a lot of time coaching against Matt Eberflus when Eberflus was with Chicago and Ben Johnson was with the Lions, but B also has a lot of Matt Eberflus's former players on his team, should have a very good handle on the Cowboys' defensive rules and scheme here. And so I expect the Bears to have a really, really well-called game here. And this opens the opportunity for some of these downfield throws. So what I like about DJ Moore, is a guy who a couple years ago, he had a 230-yard receiving game. He's had some of these 170-yard, 140-yard receiving games. He and Caleb Williams have never fully clicked, but there were still games last year where there were 10 targets, 12 targets, 13 targets. And I think that there's going to be games this year where he's a heavy focal point in this offense and some of these downfield throws. So again, the type of guy who, Josh, help me out. What was his just like his straight over under here on this one?
We had DJ Moore 55.5.
So it's one of these where it's like 55.5, and that's almost even a little bit aggressive for how he has looked in this offense so far.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like when he goes over 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, like there's so much room to the upside on this where he can just continue to add steps, add rungs on that ladder. And so really like DJ Moore as a guy this week to say, you know what, maybe I don't actually even hit the over 50% of the time, or maybe it's just barely 50% of the time. But when he hits that over, he's going to have a good shot at going up and up and up that ladder. And again, Ben Johnson, one of these guys who he's going to find something that's working. He's going to keep pressing that button until the opposing team figures out how to stop it. And that's where you see these games, with the Lions, where it's like one guy would get a ton of targets, and the next week that guy might go back, Amon-Ra St. Brown might get 14 targets one week, and the next week it might go back down to 6 or 7 targets. If Ben Johnson's seeing something that's working, he's going to keep attacking that. So, yeah, really like that in this spot this week.
Yes, sir. Again, anytime you can get elite coaching, upgrading tempo, upgrading pre-snap motion, improving scheme for their elite talents, you're just in a great spot. And projection systems have been a little bit rough on Caleb Williams so far for the first 2 weeks, and we've tried to avoid taking these slight edges to the under, just because we do believe in the coaching staff. It's the same thing as we have over in Kellen Moore with the New Orleans Saints, that we just talked about this, that when you do get these elite coaches, what they can do to individual players is massive. And I do think that's something that still isn't completely understood by the general public, or just people that maybe haven't played football before.
Yeah. I like that. Like when all things are equal, bet on the coaching. And especially when you have a matchup like this where you have priors, you can see what Ben Johnson has done against Eberflus before and how he's likely to attack. Kind of gives us a little bit of an extra edge there as well. So, Josh, you got anything else before we get out of here today?
No, I mean, we have 6 bets out already. 4 of them are unders. We were very happy to be able to get to those 4 unders pretty quickly. One thing that I forgot to mention last week, well, we did have the promo, but we'll mention this week, is we've been very successful with our CFL bets. So I understand it's Canadian football and stuff, but we've actually added that to the NFL props package as a little bonus. So if you are on the fence, maybe want a little bit extra value, maybe comparing between 2 services, if you do love that 12-man 3-down football north of border, do jump in. I think we're up about 9% now on straight bets with our CFL product over about 110 bets. So there is value there, and just wanted to mention that that is included with our NFL props package right now.
Yeah, and not only value there, more volume there in what you guys are
absolutely.
On that. And I one of the things that we've said for a long time with the props package is, you don't have to follow the sports. That's the beauty of it. coming to get the bets from us and drop the bets. So you literally don't have to know these players. You don't have to know anything about Canadian football. Reezy knows about it, and he's able to find these bets. He's got, other guys on the team who are finding these bets. And so, I mean, I think that's a really sharp shout out there as well, that we don't just have to focus on NFL. Obviously, last year we had all sorts of sports going on in the props package. This year we're tightening things up a little bit in terms of where our focus is, but NFL and CFL, that those CFL bets give us some extra edge and extra opportunity to get some money in play. So $9 pass is not on for this week, but it's still $19 for a week pass, or $149 for the entirety of the season. And you get an opportunity to just sort of ride these bets with us. And Reezy said some stuff earlier about chatting with people in the Discord, and I think that's another key component of all of this that we do is there is a lot of collaboration and a lot of talking and learning and sort of crossfire in there, where people are learning from each other, the team is learning from people are learning from the team. We're all improving together. So really cool opportunity to attack early in the season, where I think we still have some edges, some significant edges here in the books, and get some money in play. So with that, I'm going to get out of here. For Josh, signing off. I appreciate those of you who are watching live. Looks like it shows some people watching, right? This is our first time doing this. My first time running one of these live shows. So hopefully everything's going well on your guys' end watching this. And for those of you watching afterward, appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We will see you back here next week, week 4, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern on the One Week Season YouTube channel. And again, you can always catch these after the fact as well. We will see you there. We will see you at the top of the props boards this weekend.